Hey there and welcome back to another Illumination video. And recently we saw the release of the first look trailer for the upcoming Mario movie. And yeah, I think we all expected that this trailer would be utter trash, that the voice acting would be cringe, and just everything about it would make you want to crawl into a ball and cry yourself to sleep. After all, it does not seem like a very winning combination. Illumination, a studio that at its best is very charming and funny, but at its worst churns out terrible films with poor writing and humour. And combine this with a video game franchise. And well, historically, video game films are not well written and are complete and utter garbage. They either diverge way too hard from the heart of the franchise and thus don't even feel like an adaptation anymore, just something very loosely based on it, or they end up following the franchise too closely and it just all crumbles into mediocrity. And yeah, it is a very fine line you have to walk with them, and most fail to do it. And so I very much expected that this latest attempt would fail as well, especially when they released the casting list, which at first glance was truly laughable. Seriously, Pratt as Mario? Whew! I didn't feel like this was destined for greatness, and they'd end up ruining a classic character. And so before I watched the trailer, I was expecting to find myself clowning on it the whole way through. And then I watched it, and holy shit, I think this movie might actually have a real decent chance of being good. Okay, so I guess first things first. We'll go through the actual plot of the trailer itself and see what we can find. So we start off in some sort of ice kingdom as the Koopa army and Bowser's fortress makes its way towards the city. And the Koopa army assembles, Bowser makes his way through the ranks and arrives at the gates, coming face to face with a Penguin King and his army, who attack him and get instantly clapped before he destroys the city and steals their power star, screaming out that nobody can stop him now, which is when we cut to Mario falling through a pipe. I guess tumbling into the Mushroom Kingdom from the real world, where he meets Toad, and then after a bit of dialogue that the trailer skips over to keep the plot a bit more obscure, the pair rush off into the Mushroom Kingdom, bouncing along on toadstools along the way. And yeah, I have a number of thoughts on this trailer. The first is that it looks gorgeous. There's just so many different amazing shots and scenes. For starters, the character design was great and found a great balance between the classic style whilst also making the character feel cinematic, more hyper-realistic, but it still has that video game stylistic flair. And that's all well and good. Bowser looks great, Mario looks great, Toad looks great. The character design and animation quality is just astounding. And there's no reason to assume it's going to diminish in this quality from first look coming into the theatrical release. So I think from a visual standpoint, the film's going to be great. And they've obviously put in a lot of effort to bring the full range of Mario environments to life. The classic Mushroom Kingdom, all bright and vibrant, the frozen tundras where the penguins live, Bowser's volcanic fortresses, down to the spooky shit that poor Luigi always seems to encounter in his everyday life. But moving on, like I said earlier, it always seems to be a hard balancing act trying to find what works in terms of how hard to lean into the video game aspects of things. You need to straddle that line and not go too far in either direction. And from this, I would acknowledge that even though it is early days, they seem to have done this pretty well. Visually, I think they've remained faithful to the general vibe of the world they've created, using classic characters and locations, whilst also obviously taking a little bit of creative liberties, creative license. But never too much, and so it felt very genuine to the franchise. I mean, you could tell me that this is a trailer for a new Mario game, and aside from the hardcore American accents on some of these characters, I'd believe it wholeheartedly. And so, this brings me to two further elements from the trailer. Things I'm less certain about, at least in terms of a full-length film. The voice acting and the story/writing. And we'll start with the voices. When they first announced the cast for this thing, people were less than thrilled with the final result. Of particular note was the hatred of the casting of Donkey Kong, Seth Rogen, and the casting of Chris Pratt as Mario. Chris Pratt is one of those actors that went through a really intense couple of years as an actor that was in everything. Jurassic World, the MCU, a whole bunch of other films, some of which sucked and some of which were okay, and he even tried his hand at a few indie Oscar bait flicks. The typical pathway for Hollywood. Find a new talent, oversaturate them to squeeze every dollar you can out of them, rinse and repeat. And so when people heard they were making a Mario movie, by the time he was announced as being a cast member, he was well and truly in the oversaturated category, which was only made worse by his controversies. But I'm not here to take potshots at the guy. A quick look at his Wikipedia is all you need to know about that. But the end result was that it almost felt like a fake announcement, or a meme announcement. I mean, did you hear that Chris Pratt was cast as Mario? Oh shit, good one, huh? Like, what even is this timeline at this point? How did we get to this point? I mean, his audition must have been amazing. Or maybe they just thought, he'll be a good box office draw. Is he a good box office draw? Is anybody besides The Rock a box office draw anymore? Or do people just come for the franchise? But yeah, it was a bit of a joke, and then when reality sank in, people weren't happy. And I think it soured people on the entire cast in general. There was so much hate, so many deeply salty tears. And I won't lie, I was amongst them. I thought, simply based on the cast, that this was going to be complete and utter drizzling dog shit. But from what I've heard so far, the voices actually seem pretty good. The minor characters like the Penguin King, they sound great. Toad, well, he sounds like a generic sidekick type character that you always see crop up in these sorts of films. And Jack Black as Bowser, well, it wasn't what I was expecting. From what I've seen though, it's turned out pretty well. He seems intimidating enough, and obviously he has the capacity for comedy, so the character doesn't become too one-note. And really, the only major unknown here for me is Chris Pratt. I get they want to go with something a little different than the usual heavy Italian accent, but from what I've heard, I'm still not convinced, and I'm kind of worried about it. I mean, yes, you can have the other actors carry the film, but it won't be the same if Mario sucks. Like, come on. Super Mario Brothers. Mario. If he's bad, it really tanks the whole thing, so I hope he's up to the task. But yeah, like I said, from what we've seen, I am worried about that part. And so, this then brings us to the writing. This film is from Illumination. Like many studios, they have a signature branding and style, and a big part of theirs comes from the way in which their humor's derived. They really love absurd shit, like stuff that you'd see the Minions do. When in doubt, what would Minions do? That's what they ask themselves. And we've already seen this kind of stuff creep in with the penguins getting all hyped up to fight Bowser, the king smirking, thinking they're going to destroy him, only to toss snowballs and launch an ice cube via catapult. It was stupid, it was absurd, and yet it was funny. It made me laugh, much like the Minions do sometimes. But the danger is that they pull a Minions 1 and they oversaturate these sort of characters and this sort of humour to the max, which makes it not funny, and instead tiresome, and in turn pulls down the quality of the film itself. And once again, it's about straddling that line. Same with Toad. It felt kind of Gru-esque when he appears out of nowhere screaming about poisonous mushrooms, only to immediately backtrack and say that everything's fine. And when delivered in the appropriate dosage, these things are funny, and they make Illumination films shine. But at their worst, they make the films a slogfest and hard to sit through. And so, I suppose time will tell about this. But I do think the trailer was very good and had some good signs. And if they keep things looking and feeling like this, we're going to be fine. And maybe we can even say that we can add another film to the short list of good video game adaptations. But anyway, with all that being said, these are just my opinions. And I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of the trailer? You like it, hate it, think it's going to be good? Or is it a disaster waiting to happen? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.